And what really stands out in my mind right now is that the narrator, Ramon de Ocampo, constantly said, David Bowie. David Bowie. They were talking about heroes. They were playing heroes on the piano. And he said David Bowie. Hey everyone, Maya here, and today we are going to talk about the novel Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. First of all, let's give a little synopsis so we're all on the same page. Red, White, and Royal Blue is a gay, intercultural, interracial relationship between a fictional first son of the United States, Alex Claremont Diaz, and His Royal Highness, Prince Henry of England. Also fictional. They have a whirlwind romance. It explores the struggles they face in their relationship together, both politically and socially. It's a book about identity, and it's quite powerful in its representation. Casey McQuiston is a non-binary author. They published their novel, I believe, in 2018 and 2019. I'm guessing 2019, though, because the novel won the Goodreads 2019 Best Romance of the Year. So bravo, Casey McQuiston. That is quite the accomplishment. I have a lot of notes on this book. I don't take a ton of notes on books. I usually just annotate, and then I go through my annotations and piece them all together to form some sort of coherent rambling, which is my new favorite oxymoron. But with this book, I did take notes because it was an audiobook. I took 1, I took 2 and 3, I took 4 and 5. I took notes. I was about 7 hours, a little less, into the book. And I had already kind of decided what rating I wanted to give it. And this is an unpopular rating. This is a very well-loved book. I was really excited to read it. I'd heard nothing but good things. But at the point when I began my notes, I said I was going to give it a 2.5 out of 5, which would be the lowest rating I've given a book this year. And I honestly felt really guilty about this when I first gave it that initial not even halfway through rating, because it's such an important book. It's really crucial in the book community and the reading community that we have representation. Just as in any form of media, TV, movies, music, etc., we need to process the experiences of people from all sorts of backgrounds and cultures, and the LGBTQ plus community is often disregarded in literature. There are not a lot of gay romances, unfortunately, on the market. The writing in this novel bothered me a little bit, and we're gonna get into that first. Point number 1 on my very eloquent notes is writing wasn't ... Well, it was ... Meh. The reason I did not love the writing in this novel is it was inconsistent. Sometimes McQuiston would have these beautiful one-liners, and then a paragraph later, you would just get this really horrible chunk of dialogue. There was absolutely no subtext in a lot of the dialogue, and I think subtext is really key because actual humans in real life do not say exactly what they mean to express. There are layers, there's nonverbal communication, and I felt like especially the dialogue between Alex and Henry, it was very blunt. It was very much spoon-feeding the reader. Honestly, though, that's really all I have to say about the writing. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad, it was meh. The next reason I did not love this book at the beginning, and still something I have a little trouble wrapping my mind around, is there's so much pointless sex in this novel. There are about 50 to 200 pages of Henry and Alex just consecutively having sex, and it's described in quite a bit of detail. I was a little bit uncomfortable reading it, not because I'm against sex scenes in books. I actually think they're a really powerful device that can be used for profound character development or plot progression. However, in this novel, I feel like it crossed the line between being good for showing a character developing into sex for the sake of sex, you know? In this novel, Henry, the Prince of England, he knows he's gay, and Alex, the first son of the United States, is coming to terms with his sexuality. He's discovered he's bisexual, and his experiences with Henry are helping him to solidify his newfound identity. I think that's really great. So at first, I was like, yeah, sure, these sex scenes are totally warranted. They're showing Alex exploring his sexuality, learning about himself in a new way, and they're important to his growth as a character. However, after hour and a half of these sex scenes, I got bored, and I felt like it actually took away from the story, which made me really sad. Another problem I had with the novel was actually the relationship between Alex and Henry, which I feel kind of, again, horrible saying. This is such a well-loved book, and I really see why. It's really idealistic, and I think it's really important that the LGBTQ plus community have a novel like this. Heterosexual people have plenty of fluffy, light, airy novels about romances that are flawed and imperfect, but I want to treat this book like any other book. It has fantastic representation, but it is still a novel, and it still has flaws. My problem with Alex and Henry was that they were completely unflawed characters. They're very good all the way through, and I have a really hard time with characters that are purely good. I love stories where the main character is also the villain, where they're grappling with something inside of themselves, with a preconception they have, with a family issue. I love when there's no one to point a finger at and say, that is the bad guy, that is who we're against. That's something I think is a mark of really strong writing and a really incredible depiction of the human experience. But Alex and Henry, there was absolutely nothing wrong with them. There was nothing in their personalities that was really unlikable. Alex was a bit brash as a character, and that's not my favorite protagonist to read, but it was framed as a good thing. He was sarcastic, and he was witty, and he had a lot of banter with Henry, but they were just such unflawed characters that I had a difficult time connecting to them. On the topic of witty banter, I feel like this book was kind of based around it. This book felt like its foundation was constructed of witty banter, sarcasm, and pop cultural references that I honestly don't think are going to last the test of time. It's a little risky to put pop culture or things from your current day into a novel. And that sounds really counterintuitive because we're always taught to write what we know. But the reason I really had a problem with the book relying so heavily on pop culture for moments of comic relief and relationships with characters is that it was very heavily focused on an American audience. I don't know if Casey McQuiston is American. I'm assuming they are, just based on the way this novel was written. It made fun of the Brits quite a bit. This novel relied quite heavily on British stereotypes. You know, the tea, the scones, the saying bullocks. Blimey! If you aren't American, I feel like a lot of the pop culture references in this book aren't going to make sense to you, and that takes away from the reading experience. We're just getting the cons out of the way at the very start. Okay, so my next issue with the book is its politics. Here's why. The book pretty much centers around politics. It's a romance, but it's a political romance. And by that I mean that it is two political figures. Maybe it's a figurehead in the case of Henry, but Alex, he is the first son of the United States. His mom is the president. Like, how freaking cool is that? The politics in this book make no sense. And that would be okay. Like, I have no problem fictionalizing politics and making it work into your story. Quiston just throws in a private email server that Henry and Alex used to communicate so casually. And I was like, what the heck? Like, if someone finds this, they're screwed. They are out of the White House. Like, what? But really, the politics, it would have been okay that they didn't make sense if the book didn't rely so heavily on them for plot development. There's very little plot in this book, other than the fact that Alex's mom is running for re-election again, and she is up against a conservative man, and he is not a good guy. He is a very bad guy. But that plot really comes in only, like, it's past the halfway mark that plot comes in. It's a nitpicky thing. I know it's a nitpicky thing, and I know that is not why people read this book. People read this book for the romance, and I totally get that, but the politics bothered me. All in all, according to my notes, the reason I did not love this book is because I felt like it was painfully unaware of how unaware it was for a book that was trying so hard to be aware. So representation is really key, not only on BookTube. We're gonna have a video about BookTube and representation and diversity, but also in the novels that we read, that we consume, and that we talk about. It was a gay, interracial, intercultural relationship between Alex and Henry. That being said, both main characters were born into or acquired at a very young age a lot of privilege. And I felt like that was something the book kind of ignored. One is the Prince of England. Prince of England. I don't know. He's wealthy. He has had opportunity his whole life. He's had so many connections and networking opportunities, and he is gay. He's not allowed to publicly declare his sexuality or to date who he wants because of the image the royal family is trying to preserve. That is a very, 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 very valid problem and something to grapple with. But he's the Prince of England. And the book just ignores all of the privilege that he has had from a very, very young age. I felt like this book was more concerned about being quote unquote woke than it was about inspiring conversation. I really love the sentiment of woke culture. Initially, it means that one is alert to and aware of racial and social discrimination and inequities within society. It's really important to be aware of injustice so that you can use whatever privilege you have to fight against it. But I think that woke culture has turned into more of a self-satisfying, judgmental phenomenon. And what I mean by that is I'm kind of gonna paraphrase President Obama here. I did some research for this video, and at one point President Obama referred to the woke culture as a purity test. If you don't agree with me, you cannot be a part of the conversation. And that's a little bit of how I felt about this book. This is a spoiler, so if you don't want spoilers for the book, I suggest skipping ahead. But the main antagonist in this novel is the presidential opponent to Alex's mom. His name is Richard something. Or no, his last name is Richards. Richards. And he is conservative, and he outs Alex and outs Henry, and he's a horrible, horrible person. I have no doubt that there are people who are conservative that are horrible, but I also know that there are people who are liberal who are horrible. There are people who are independents who are horrible. Horrible has no particular political alignment. And because this book is so liberal in many ways, and because the antagonist was pretty much the only conservative character with a name in the entire novel, I felt like this novel made it very difficult for people to have conversations that didn't agree with it. I myself am extremely liberal, and for that reason I loved all of the empowerment and the identity that was poured into this novel. But I couldn't help but think about people who might not agree with me and might not agree with the perspective of the novel, and who felt like they couldn't be a part of that discussion either in BookTube or politically because they didn't agree. And I think that's a problem because we are not allowing debate and discussion and respectful debate. Respectful is a key word there to occur. I also want to briefly mention identity politics. So according to some dictionary I found on the internet, identity politics is a tendency of people of a particular race, religion, social background, or etc. to form exclusive political alliances, and it results in prioritizing concerns closest to them. In I think it was 2019, early 2019, January 2019, I had signed up for the Women's March, and I was gonna go with my mom, and I was so excited because feminism! My dad ended up sending me some articles before I went to the Women's March about the lack of intersectionality in the Women's March movement. Feminism, I think, has become a very heavily white female demographic, middle class as well. I think that's another subset. It's become a phenomenon that often disregards the intersectionality of privilege. We have to consider intersectionality. Other than women of color, another demographic that is not often discussed in the intersectionality movement are disabled women, women who work as sex workers, LGBTQ+ women. There's a whole range of intersectionality there. And intersectionality is vital. And I think that actually McQuiston did an okay job of that. I liked that Alex was not only gay, but he was also part Latino. I think that was really powerful because it showed that there's dimension in privilege and it's not just a straightforward black and white phenomenon. A question I asked my friend Austin when we were texting about this novel was, is it a disservice to the book to only love the book for the representation? Because representation is so important. I cannot stress that enough. It is vital. We need it desperately. We need it in more quantity. We need it with better quality. We need it ASAP. But is it a disservice to the book not to hold it up to the standards, whether that's the technical writing standards, the plot standards, the character development standards of other books just because it has representation? Is it a disservice to the book to like it solely for the representation? Does that take away from the overall creative expression and process? And the answer is, I don't know. In an ideal world, we could compare books by their entirety. We could compare books by their whole. But because there is so little diversity and representation in novels, I feel obligated to support this book. This makes me think of my status on the issue of female filmmakers. So when I'm older, I really want to be a director, a screenwriter, an animator. I want to be in the film world. That is my calling. If there is a film released in theaters that was directed by a female director, I will go see that film in theaters to the best of my ability, whether I'm interested in the premise of the film or not. That is because there are so few female directors in Hollywood and in the mainstream media business that it's important to support the ones that are there so that their films can make money and that studios can realize that female film directors are a good investment. In short, I love stories because they're about the human experience, and the human experience includes representation. Yeah, Red, White, and Royal Blue, man. I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna give it a 3-star review. Solid average. I did not like it, but I think that everyone should read it because LGBTQ+ romances are so rare, and I feel like this one did a decent job with it, and I think the representation, especially with the intercultural and interracial couple factor, was so important. And I also loved that there was a female president in the United States. Like, imagine! This book is about identity, and it's about taking pride in your identity, and it's about supporting people who are different from you but who you love because we're all human, and love is the most human thing of them all. Thank you for tuning in today, everyone. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Again, this is a really conversation starter of a video, and I will see you all Wednesday. Bye-bye.